I tend to sit in a quiet room sometimes for an hour or 2 hours when I can, or even traveling if we can. Um, if we find a spot that's not, inhabited, remote area, location, sometimes you just sit for an hour, 2 hours, and use the quiet space or the slower paced environment to rid the distractions and focus on your train of thought, to acknowledge the thoughts. And then sometimes, they come and go every couple minutes, it changes. Other times, there will be that one question maybe you're asking yourself, or that one thought that keeps coming. And then you could focus on that. Am I happy right now? What do I want out of this? What do I want in life? And questions only you can answer. But I think that we're so distracted by media, noise. Cities, there's just constant chaos. And a lot of times people can't even answer the simplest questions. Like, what do you want to do in life? Like, think of how many of us can't even answer that. And that's sad. We don't have goals. And the goals we do make, a majority of them are unachievable, realistically. And I think a lot of us secretly know that. That's why, there's so many people who save for years to go on this fancy trip somewhere, and then they still never go, because life's constantly changing and things happen, and it's crazy. And keeping up with trends. So the amount of stuff we have, I have enough to fit in a backpack, and most of that is my dog's stuff. A sleeping bag, a makeshift shelter, tarp and paracord, a multi-tool, and a water filter. I have enough to get by if we get stuck somewhere again. And we've traveled a lot, and we've been stuck a lot of places. But, basically, I have a camping backpack that can fit everything I need for me and my dogs to survive without living in a city for quite some time. So we could survive probably a few months with very, very minimal human contact before having to replace anything, which is great. But everything else is kind of, I started thinking, what's the point? I worked multiple jobs last year for a short time, and I was constantly stressed, and I felt like I had no time, no peace, no place where I could just go and think. You work for things you don't need to impress people you don't like anyway. And through this whole process, you can't even afford it. Because you can work full-time now and still not be able to afford a house, still not be able to afford a car. Insurance is through the roof, especially for, ages 18 to 24. I know people that are spending over $200 a month just for the insurance for one person because of the age thing. And then, not to mention how much cars cost right now, and then, the housing market and everything else. And, we could stress out all day about the economy and inflation, or you could just take a step back for a second and think, do you even need it? I had to ask myself that. I was working myself and stressing myself to death. And then I took a step back and I was like, what is the point of all of this? I work constantly. I paid for my dog's vet bills and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I still had nothing saved. I owned nothing. You know, I still couldn't afford to pay off a house or a car or anything like that. And then I started thinking I didn't get to go out to events or do anything fun because I never knew what my schedule was going to be like one day or the next, what people around me were having planned, and I had to take a few months. We ended up in Moab, Utah for a bit, just chilling in the desert camping, and I really started, you know, all I had was myself. Moab is not a social place. So it's a very, very small city, if you could call it that. And people are not exactly social. It's not really rude or anything. It's just most people pretty much just don't acknowledge you exist in general. And most of the people there are traveling, so they don't really expect you to stay enough to make friends. But when I was feeling extremely isolated and all I had was myself, I had to deal with these questions that I'd been putting off. Why was I doing it? What did I get out of it? And what was the point? So that was something that was kind of interesting, but I realized there wasn't a point. There wasn't a point of keeping up with trends. We don't even need a house. To be honest, I traveled on freight trains for years. You know, I can make a shelter out of anything. You keep a hatchet in your bag, like a single piece steel, then the handle won't break, but you find a decent spot that's isolated enough. You could build your own shelter, temporary setup. You can, you know, keep a small tent or a tarp in your bag, and you'll survive just fine. But we're taught to believe that we need all this stuff, that at the end of the day, why does it matter? Why? The new iPhone, you know, a new laptop, like, even TV. I don't watch TV. What am I getting from it? It's just mind-numbing and wasting time. Time I could be spending with my tiny dogs, having a meaningful relationship. But we're just constantly distracting ourselves with all these little things that don't even matter. Or, you know, it's temporary. It makes you happy for 5 minutes till you're on to the next trend. Why? Clothes, too. Hello. You know, I'm a fashion disaster, I know. But, I just got to a point, I got tired of trying to keep up with everything, even camping gear. You know how many guys travel and they're competitive about what camping gear they have. I'm like, I have multi-tools literally from the 1960s that still work, and they're great, and, you know, I find stuff at garage sales, so I'm good. Goodwill, you know, it's so stupid. And people were like, well, I have a $300 knife, and I'm like, okay, I have a, you know, single piece of steel hatchet that, like, literally I could pick up at a garage sale for $10, and I'm good to go. Sometimes less. But, it's just, what is the point? Like, what do you have to gain from it? And everything's made to break now anyway, so it doesn't matter how much you spend on something. It's gonna break.